Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Michael, how are you today?
Oh, I'm good, Barry. I am good. Little nervous, but I'm good. How are you?
I think I'm doing well. I think the nerves might be, I'm going to speculate that the nerves might be because what's on deck today is Martin Heidegger's essay, The Question Concerning Technology. And we've discussed this before and in another episode that I think is going to drop at the same time as this episode becomes available.
Mm-hmm.
This episode has a different rationale. In this essay, we're going to talk about the Heidegger essay in the other podcast, in the other episode, rather.
Yeah, we did a pretty straight analysis and deconstruction of the essay. So I think what we did
talked about a lot about context, so that if you don't know much about Heidegger or the context of the essay, you might want to listen to that episode.
Yeah, the first one was very much, I think, what you would reasonably expect a discussion of the question concerning technology to be. Today, we're going to do something different, Barry.
Yes. So we came back to the essay and with a fresh rereading. And this is not the first time this has happened with me and Heidegger, and I doubt I would imagine this is the same. You have the same experience as I do, which is all of a sudden it seemed like a completely different essay. And I culled very different points from the essay than I did previously. So rather than panic over them, or panic over the state of affairs, we decided to turn our lemons into lemonade and use this as an opportunity. Because, as Heidegger affirms at the end of the essay, questioning is the piety of thought. So in that Heideggerian spirit, we decided to sort of give a fresh take on the question concerning technology essay and have a conversation about it that's going to drive, it's not a spoiler alert, but just to let you know where we're headed to. We're going to talk about the essay and what we think now are some key ideas and key problems, key definitions in the essay. But where we're going to go with a mind toward doing something we didn't do in the other episode, which is think about Heidegger's relevance for our particular digital media moment. So that's what we're doing here, is a different kind of trajectory than the previous episode. So we're not going to talk so much about historical context or even about the A-bomb or the geopolitical context for this essay. But instead sort of extract his ideas about technology, because they're pretty interesting, to say the least, interesting and challenging in and of themselves. And we thought they deserve a fresh take and a fresh reading. And then and just to state our purpose one more time, the aim of all this is to more purposely ask the question, what is Heidegger's formulations? What is the question concerning technology? What does it disclose or reveal about our digital media culture? Okay, I mean, that's probably too much setup. Do you have anything to say before you go on? Or
no, I'm thinking that this should be interesting in the sense that I am like you, I've reread it and I've come to, I think in going through it, I too have made some new connections. But what stands out as interesting to me is this is obviously written in a pre-digital time and from a pre-digital perspective. And so what always astounds me with this is how versatile his thinking is and how readily applicable it is. And so, my 2 cents coming in is just that obviously he was not talking about the internet, but at the same time, I feel that he absolutely was talking about the internet.
And that's why we're driving to our culmination here.
Yeah. So I feel like this is, how do I want to say this? This is a dance I think I know how to do, but I'm not fully prepared to do. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see how this
I
goes.
love it. I
All
love
right.
it.
So
Okay,
start us off, Barry.
starting it off. I was really struck this time by how complex, controversial, certainly provocative the central claim of the essay is. And I guess maybe better, how profoundly counterintuitive it is to common sense understandings of technology. Because, I mean, look what we just did in that discussion thread we just had. We talked about, and we assumed, and I think most of our listeners would make the same assumption with justice, right? With good reasons, that there is, almost an absolute difference between, say, digital technologies and analog technologies, let alone a comparison between the inventions of the Mayans and the Aztecs and the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians and the inventions that came out, inventions and new modes of production that arose with the Industrial Revolution. That differences in kind seem to suggest that that if we have, it's logical to conclude that if we're talking about technology, we better admit a lot of discontinuity because there isn't that much in common between these various inventions, discoveries, whatever. Heidegger is, like I said, provocative in saying, you know what? From the very beginning, technology, well, the claim is, and he's explicit about this, technology has an essence. Unpacking that idea is what really messed with my head today, because what that, in essence, what that means is that there is a continuity, a strong continuity that we can discern from the earliest inventions and your and my and everyone's iPhone. That there's something happening here.
Okay. So I think then the natural question, the natural extension of that is, what does that mean? And Heidegger's answer is functional, it's productive. He says technology is a means to an end. That is what the core. So technology is a way of getting things done. And so, you talk about the Mayans and a reflecting pool to see the stars. And so it's a means. But, as I'm thinking about this through a digital lens, what does this look like now? I think that this becomes, given the answer that I want to make or that I want to offer, this becomes a very tricky question. So as I'm thinking about this, I think that the essence of technology is not just a means to an end, but it is the other. It is something that is inherently not human. The challenge there is that it has become and increasingly becomes the human lens. And so there's a paradox or a contradiction in this, right? And for me, I think about, in the article he talks, or in the essay, excuse me, he talks about the distinction between older technologies and newer technologies. And the distinction is, I think, is the older technology he basically calls handicraft, right? So we commonly come to the hammer for that. Right. The modern technologies are, it's not sufficient to say that they're not handicraft, but they are complex, they are connected, they are increasingly efficient. They extend man's ability to do things. And so obviously there's very heavy shades of Elul in here. So to me, I think that the essence of technology in a modern digital sense, you could make the argument, I'm not saying this is the argument, but you could make the argument that this is that non-human thing through which we humans engage the world around us. And I don't know how fully comfortable I am with that, but everything is technological at this point. You know, the notion of the farm and the wheat, you know, the natural, which would be outside of the technological, is an increasing rarity, and it is something that is almost exclusively accessed through
Mhm.
technology. I mean, you know, even like I don't know, even when I go on a, you know, a bike ride out into the woods or out into, you know, wherever, I get there on a bicycle. That's technology. I mean,
Mhm.
it's increasingly rare to try to identify an instance where we can access the natural, divorced from
Mhm.
technologies. So that would be my offering. What I don't know, how's that
Well, no,
sit?
it's well, but I think and I think that we can proceed to the other point that I gained at the fresh reading, because I think you're talking about it. Even though technology, as I read Heidegger, um, you know, the idea that you mentioned that technology is a means to an end or something that has its sole significance in being a means to an end. Of course, this essay really strongly pushes back on that idea. Um, and instead, so I guess that's one thing to say. And then the second thing to say in regard to, I mean, that Heidegger is very well aware, I'm guessing you got the impetus for the stories you just told in, you know, from looking at Heidegger, because he's very well aware of that dynamic, that even though he claims there's a consistent essence to technology that makes technology, uniquely technology, he's very aware of the differences that you were in fact well describing, which is that in the contemporary moment, something has happened so that increasingly the relation between the human and the technological, it's harder to discern, and that even more difficult to discern is the distinction between nature and technologies. But all three of those things, there's something radically different, you know. So this is one of the glories of the essay, but it makes it really challenging to think about. That on the one hand, he makes the audacious claim that technology, despite all of its manifestations, has an essence that we can talk about and describe. But at the same time, he's very aware of exactly what you're pointing out, that I need my bike to go out into the field. That increasingly, that when we talk about farmers, we're not talking about farms. We're talking or cultivating the land. We're talking about a means to create a food industry, an agricultural food industry. I think he even uses that term.
Mhm.
So he's aware that there is something, even though he talks about the continual essence, the continuing essence, he's very aware that something's happened, and that symbiosis, or that relation between humans, nature, and technology, something's out of whack. And that is very much driving, that awareness that you're talking about, Michael, is very much driving the essay. Okay, and that actually, I think, moves us to the second thing I wanted to talk about, and that I want you to talk about, because this is the other claim about continuity that Heidegger makes in relation to technology. It's not just that there's a continuous essence to technology, but that technology and technological development always does two things to humans. And so maybe we can unpack this idea. So that throughout history, I mean, that's, like I said, the big claim for continuity there. And I can imagine historicists just basically, and in fact, I think that is the claim. This is the problem that many historicists of various stripes whether they're historians of science or historians of economics. This is a problem that I'm sure they have with Heidegger, which is this idea that, they're more aware of the discontinuities and they want to talk about ruptures within history. And Heidegger is really talking about continuities. And so among the continuities, it's not just the continuity of the essence of technology. There's also this wild claim that every new technological development inframes the world, presents it in a different way, and at the same time reveals something. And this is important to add, the revelation can only happen, the revelation is, this is Heidegger's humanism. The revelation of technology is something that only humans can process, that only humans can see, that only humans can meditate on. So maybe we should talk a little bit, see if we can unpack, and this is a task for the afternoon because everybody, this is really kind of the most complex of the essay, part of the essay, but let's see if we can shed light where there's darkness. But what does he mean by the inframing and the revealing caused by technology?
Yeah. So when he talks about inframing, I understand this as basically an orienting mechanism, right? Like a given technology will orient us or predispose us to act in a certain way in relation to that technology. And then the revealing, and I have some questions for you about the revealing, but the revealing, I think, is an opportunity out of that in framing and our reaction to it. I think that he says that basically what is revealed is aletheia, is truth, right? And so we see, I guess, this is a question. Are we then, is what is being revealed, does that say something about our essence or our nature? And I'll give you an example, because you in the other episode that we did on this, which, dear listener, you can skip over to as soon as you'd like, we talked about inframing, and you had mentioned an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David sees a giant knife and says that he just wants to stab as soon as he sees the knife. And so we talked probably a little too long about that in the other episode, so I'll keep this brief. But you can say, okay, I see a knife. It makes me want to use the knife. And what does one do with a knife? One stabs with a knife. So there's the inframing. Is the revealing here, is this saying something about the destructive or violent nature of man, as opposed to saying, wow, I want to spread butter on a piece of toast and give it to my neighbor? And I think that you could argue that, well, all people will respond in accordance to the knife, but not all will necessarily respond with the same response to the knife. So you may look at it and say, Mike, I want to put butter on a piece of bread. And I might say, I'm going to join Larry David and join the stabbing range. I'm going to go to the stabbing range with this, right? Both are obviously instances of inframing, right? Neither one of us said, hey, we want to go butterfly watching with this knife.
Well, let's clarify what you said. You're doing gold here. And what you just said is really important. Let me make sure I understand it. You're describing inframing as this moment where humans react to, not just in framing in your description, is the kind of requires the human response, right?
It does. And not only that,
the human hears the call of the technology in order to activate it, right?
If the human hears the call of technology. So for example, it would be pretty simple to imagine, I don't know, a record player. Okay. So that's a technology. If I hear a record player, what do I want to do? I want to put a record on it. But I could put that in front of somebody at this point who has no idea what a record player is. If they don't recognize the technology as a technology, they're likely to say, I'm going to use this thing to prop a door open. So I think that there's a certain awareness of the intentionality behind the technologies in order to gauge how the inframing will take, how that will take shape.
Can we say this is a really great example, and one of the reasons I think it's a great example is that I'm puzzled and don't know what to say. But let's work with the phonograph here, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a predetermined thing to say about it. It's a great example. Let's talk about your specific example of the person who is unaware of what a phonograph is and is confronted with it. Would
Mm-hmm.
you say further that the revealing doesn't take place? I guess an inframing took place, but the revealing never took place.
Oh
Would that be
no,
how you would?
no,
Is that?
I don't think that's what I'm trying to say.
Uh-huh.
The inframing takes place, but the inframing defaults to a known technology, right? So this person may not understand the designer's intention behind the record player,
Mhm. Mhm.
but they understand well that if you stick a heavy object in front of a door, that technology will keep the door open. And
Hmm.
so in that case, and I don't know if I'm applying Heidegger appropriately here. I mean, I'm going to fully acknowledge that this is maybe not quite right, but would we say then that the revealing is, so you might argue, okay, the person who recognizes the record player is going to play a record, and what does that tell us about that person? Well, it tells us that they're familiar with this technology, that they understand this technology, and then we might even make the argument that how what they play, how they play, it could potentially reveal something about them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the person who doesn't recognize the record player as such, and
There's no
props,
revealing. There's no aletheia.
no, there is the
Huh.
revealing there. We've revealed ignorance of this technology.
Hmm.
Because again, to me, it's the truth. Well, what is the truth in that moment? The truth in that moment is
Who's
that,
perceiving? I guess this is where I'm having problems with that. Isn't the revelation only happening in the person who knows the technology and therefore can say that person is ignorant because they don't know the technology?
well, see, that's the
But it's
question. That's
yeah,
the question right there in terms of like, well, subject object, who's
yeah,
where in the grammar of this situation,
yeah.
right? So if you and I are watching this, we say, wow, that person doesn't understand what that is. That's a revealing. They have said that this moment, this interaction with technology has revealed something about that person. Um, and I think maybe this speaks to our own ignorance, to be quite honest with you, because if I don't recognize it and I prop a door open, I have this is revealed what I wanted the door open.
Well, I think Heidegger would answer that I think Heidegger would say that what's revealed is that you've understood. I'm thinking about the example that Heidegger uses in the essay about the house.
Mm-hmm.
So the house, how is the house revealing? I take that to mean beyond its function. Heidegger says, well, the house is revealing. And it strikes me that the house is revealing of the potential of wood or whatever the materials of the building are. Um, it's revealing a potentiality within materials in relation to space, the space of the earth, and that you can say, that my understanding of the house example is that Heidegger is saying, what's revealing connected here? Well, once you see a house, you realize that it's possible to utilize space on the earth with materials in a way that perhaps you never comprehended before. So with your example of the doorstop, you realize there is a potential to create a new situation with matter with your doorstop. And Michael, when you were talking about the phonograph this time, I wondered whether or not revelation of ignorance could be a huge revelation. In fact, we know it is the case, right? Like when people's first encounter with technology, or they go like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know what this is happening. So that's a revelation of ignorance, and a revelation of ignorance and an experience of novelty. That's like one of the highest forms of knowledge.
It
So
is.
that could be a way in which revelation works when the person is ignorant of the technology, the technological and framing.
Mm-hmm. Shall we jump to point 3?
We could jump to, yes, yeah, let's jump to point 3, which is basically an extension of point 2. The how would Heidegger's example is the house. Heidegger's example is also what happens with the Rhine River in the Industrial Revolution when it becomes used for other purposes, for landscaping and managing and controlling the environment, etc. Well, but of course, he doesn't talk about digital culture. And the payoffs, Heidegger says the payoff of thinking about technology in the way that he's thinking is if you admit his major claim that technology has an essence, and it doesn't matter how it unfolds or develops or evolves over history, that essence is the same. And the situation of revealing and enframing always occurs. Then theoretically, in fact, it's the test for Heidegger. What we're about to do right now is the test for Heidegger. That if we don't see enframing and revealing in digital media, then his concepts fall apart. So this is really kind of the ultimate test.
Yeah, and I think before we can answer this, we have to backtrack a little bit, because as much as technology is an enframing and a revealing, Heidegger also argues that it's a challenging.
Yes.
And that
indeed.
challenge is as I understand him, that challenge is basically that technology equips man to dominate nature, right? That is his,
absolutely
that is the tension that he is dealing with. And in
right.
creating and in dominating nature, we create the standing reserve, right? So that we harness nature.
And we become the standing reserve.
And that's where I think this question becomes very interesting, in terms of not so much what it just does to nature, but what and how it acts on us. And so what is the essence of the internet? Well, I mean, that's a big question that I couldn't even begin to try and figure out how to answer it. But the challenging to me about the internet is how this digital space engages or resists or overlaps, whatever the case may be, with the natural spaces. Because we think of our lived lives, our lived experiences in some sort of natural environment, right? Like you go outside, you walk to the store, you go wherever you go out into nature. And the internet really creates this alternate space where we go in, right? I mean, like, I don't know where, if we go physically, we stay in a chair perhaps, but it is a unnatural space. And
virtual space.
Virtual,
you're referring to virtual space and simulation. Right?
Sometimes it's the most obvious words that are hard to get to. Thank you. Yes, they're virtual, but the virtual by its very nature is not natural, right? Words are hard. Okay, words are hard for me today, and so I think that that's an interesting thing to look at here, because in terms of its capacity to enframe, or its capacity to challenge, or its capacity to reveal, digital spaces are, by their very existence, contra to nature. And despite the fact that they can show us nature, that they can teach us about nature, we can expose ourselves, we can be exposed to nature. Let's not expose ourselves. But we can be exposed to nature while still being very unnatural. So there's an interesting contradiction here. And I was wondering, and I'm curious as to your thoughts, and I don't know whether this plays into your understanding of this or not, but we think about aletheia and technology revealing some sort of truth. When we apply this to a digital context, I wonder if this idea becomes now a purely abstract philosophical thing? Or does technology now simply reveal other technologies? Because in a digital world, there is no natural. So if for Heidegger, the idea, the essence of the resistance to technology, right, is this sort of this natural space. If we apply this to a place that is by its very nature digital and therefore not natural,
not a natural space,
does that become a purely philosophical academic pursuit, or is there value in technologies revealing technologies?
That's a great question. I'm going to try to answer it. I'm going to try to answer it by taking a slightly sideways position, but I think I think I'm still answering. I think Heidegger, I don't know a Heidegger specific answer to your question, but it does seem that as long as there is the question of the human subject, i.e., the human subject is weighing in on your question, as long as there's the human subject, then we have that essential, literally essential character of technology manifests, and we're still in the same cosmos that we were before. Because the important thing, I mean, you're absolutely right that the technological nature binary is really being questioned here, or there's a lot of pressure on that. I think Heidegger would say, as long as you have that human element able to meditate on the problem, then it's not abstract. I think in the sense of the word you were using it is not really pertinent or somehow irrelevant. I think he would still say, well, as long as you have the human meditation, the ability to meditate, to reflect on the revealing, then you're still within the continuum that has always been there with the inventions of technological emergences. Is that sort of an answer?
I think so. I was expecting you to put that slightly differently, but I think it's the same place. Are you basically saying that the human presence is nature? I mean, is that
it? Yes.
okay?
That.
Then yeah, I'm totally on board with you. I think that makes sense.
The only reason why, the only reason why I wouldn't put it that way, and maybe I'm wrong not to put it that way, is it does seem to me, in my reading of the essay this time, that even though the boundaries between the human and the natural are all, that's very artificial boundary, and the difference between the human and the technological, that's also can be, with the example of the hammer, that can also be a very artificial boundary. He does seem to want to he doesn't seem to want to get rid of these words or eliminate these words. He still uses the word nature. He still uses the word human. And so the only thing that makes me, because I mean, I agree exactly that's the point I was trying to make, that the human is still there in that way. We still have nature, right? But Heidegger is he seems kind of intent on keeping these three things and still insisting that they have their own character, their own discrete nature.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and that's where this gets complicated for me. Is that I'm wondering if he ends his essay basically saying, "Look, we have to watch technology. We have to be attentive to what's happening." He's not a technological Luddite. He's just saying you need to attend to what this is. And you think about where digital technologies specifically are going, with advances in artificial intelligence, there's now, it's like we're trying to upload our consciousness. I had seen something today. They were talking about the potential for lab grown brains to become conscious. This whole sort of technological, it's what he warns about, really, the technological dominance of the nature. of the natural, excuse me. And so I wonder if, in terms of what the internet is doing and how we have to watch it, I think that the initial response to that is often, well, we have to be careful about how we are using these technologies, right? Are they being used to surveil? Are they being used to manipulate? Um, are they being used to our, developmental benefits or demise? But I think there's another question that
Mhm.
involves sort of this alternate consciousness, which really complicates what he's doing.
Can I give you my takeaway in the form of a comment question for the
Absolutely.
day?
Absolutely.
It's along the subject. I've been lingering through. One of in considering this third topic, like how does the internet fit in all this? I came up with an example of revealing. Here's my major takeaway, and like I said, my takeaway. I don't want to take your takeaway away from you, but I I think this is kind of my final thought on it, and this is my final thought, and I'm really interested in what you think of this final concluding thought. So I started thinking about the internet and the revealing that Heidegger talks about. And here was the example that came to my mind. And I'm curious whether you think it's viable. I was thinking about like documentaries like The Social Dilemma, or just what we have noticed as bystander participants in internet culture in the last 2-3 years, arguably longer, but certainly in the post-Trump era in America, but probably there are different political circumstances that make the post-Trump era kind of widespread through a large part of the globe. So does is we have noticed that the anonymity of the internet that kind of runs rampant in things like 4chan or even in Reddit. We notice that the anonymity, well, all you have to do is go on Twitter and you will see that most people write, conduct politics, respond to events, respond to politics in either an ironic way or a moralizing way. And that, I mean, in a sense, Twitter and even whole websites are dedicated to what I heard someone describe. Michael Miller said this, and it's a wonderful description. He described, sorry to all our listeners who look at Wonkette, but he called Wonkette high bourgeois snark. So there's a kind of ironic discourse or ironic pose that seems to be the default idiom for some websites and some platforms. And with Reddit and 4chan, we have found that commentary and communication tends to be really highly aggressive, competitive, mean-spirited trolling, right? We came up with a new term for it in certain online platforms. So my takeaway and my question for you, Michael, is, would this count as a revealing? This observation. And then I guess my other question, which maybe we don't have time to talk about, would be, if that's the revealing, what do we do with revealing? Maybe the revealing is tied to what you just said, because it sounded like your last comment, you were tying the revealing to the need for an ethical comportment or an ethical awareness in the internet. So maybe that's where I'm coming from with my takeaway. I'll shut up, but
Yeah,
that,
I think it is both an inframe. I think it's a good example of both an inframing and a revealing. That these technologies, these platforms, based on their configurations, right, their capacities to to create an end, right? They're means to an end, but the way that they are constructed encourage certain behaviors. These behaviors, I think, become a de facto standing reserved as again, a compelling logic or voice for the enactment or, disbandment of certain things. Right. So this is what public opinion is basically what I'm calling it. Right. And that this is by its very nature a revealing. What is it that we see? I mean, what is made clear? What is the, I don't know if this is the right word for it, but what is the truth? What is revealed?
What is
I think absolutely. I was thinking as you were talking about what my takeaway from looking at Heidegger in this way is, and I come back. I have a kind of a tidy one. I think about his distinction between older technologies and modern technologies, and the older technologies being handicraft, and the modern technologies being modern by their nature, by the complexity of their nature and their interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness, which instrumentalizes
It does.
resources, turns
And
nature into resources.
and I think that exactly. And I think that the nature, or excuse me, the degree to which something can inframe and therefore and thereby the nature of what is revealed, I think is the totality of that is connected inexorably to the level of the connectedness. How connected is something? And I think that the big evolution here technologically is absolutely in how connected things are. I mean, just as we've been talking, my phone buzzed, my watch buzzed because my phone buzzed, and a little thing plurped, bopped up on the computer, letting me know that both my watch and my phone were connecting. And it is probably in the process of doing all this, set my coffee maker off somehow. Everything is increasingly pulling towards this center. Everything is now becoming things that were so wildly disconnected are now increasingly connected and speaking to each other. And so I think that if we look at how Heidegger concludes and says, it is our job to be stewards, we have to watch what is happening. I wonder if maybe we may have missed our moment, and now, this is kind of a scarier place than it needs to be, or maybe that's not right. Maybe a scarier place than we would like it to be, because
we weren't stewards. We weren't stewards at the crucial moment for the emergence of these technologies.
And I think the more complex they become, and I think the more complex they become, the harder it is to understand or to see what that end is. Yeah. So that's my takeaways. On this beautiful Thursday afternoon, my takeaway is we could be screwed.
Well, I did want to can I underscore this takeaway?
Yeah.
I'll try to keep it brief, because the thrust of my commentary on Heidegger, and I think your commentary for most of the episode, was we were trying to harmonize. I was very consciously trying to harmonize what Heidegger is doing and saying that it's relevant to the present moment. But what you just brought up is perhaps cause for a strong critique of Heidegger, because it seems like you're pointing toward a kind of a radical rupture in our current moment, in literally in the moment that we now have. Well, Michael, this has been, I was tremulous going into this, but I feel the fear has left my bones in relation to Heidegger. Appreciate that. It was a great time talking to you, as always.
Absolutely, Barry. Thank you. And again, I feel like we've come face to face with the man and live to walk away. Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Hey there. One more thing real quick. If you have questions or comments about what we've talked about, go ahead and drop us an email from our website at www.criticalmediastudiespodcast.com, or you can visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Critical Media Studies Pod. Thanks.